Fraser, welcome. Thanks for joining me and telling us all about sort of your take on security and privacy and maybe some sort of delve into AI. Look forward
Yeah,
to our discussion.
fantastic, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
Can you give us, first of all, give us the sort of elevator pitch for you and what your business does?
Yeah, so we work with well, my background essentially was an advisor, so financial advice, and I worked in advice tech, and I've worked in licensing, and all those things together combined certainly pointed me into this direction of to what we're doing now with cybersecurity because it was it told me that firms, professional service firms, whether they be financial advice or any professional firm for that matter, hold such important information and data. They don't always know what they don't know. And when you do know, you go, okay, well, now we need to do something about it. So that sort of drew me into this space. And so I work with those firms on three areas. One is helping them set their technology. Not that I do the technology setting, I actually work with their IT teams. Two, making sure their compliance documentation and reporting is in place because that's really, really important if they ever have an incident to make sure they can provide that information. And three, help them with their teams because their teams are often the weakest link in the process. And the way that human beings use technology can be really dangerous if they're not trained in a certain way. And just give them, ongoing education training and those sorts of things. So that we do find that a lot of what we're doing is working with people's teams.
Sounds good. We just, for a bit of context for our listeners, Fraser and I were introduced by a mutual acquaintance, and I thought there's lots of information that Fraser told me in our sort of first meeting that is worth sharing. So here we are today. And I think anyone, whether you're sort of single advisor practice or at the larger end of the scale, you get some value from what Fraser shares today. So look forward to it. If we're going to kind of cut to the chase, what is the number one sort of blind spot that you see in practices today? What do financial advisors need to go and kind of look at ASAP?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest blind spot is just assuming that this is a tech problem, right? So cybersecurity is just all around technology, and if the technology is safe, then I'm safe. I think that's probably the biggest blind spot we see. Um, in if I was to point just to one, because obviously with cybersecurity, it's kind of like this large umbrella of information, a bit like financial services, where there's all these different things that sort of sit underneath it. But I would definitely say that the assumption that my IT team have got this under control, and that concept of not knowing what they don't know at this point.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So a little bit of education, kind of just a bit of self-awareness and start to dig into the topic. You're probably going to pretty quickly uncover some truths that you need to have a look at.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, nice. So if you're a practice and you've got a pretty tight budget, you're kind of growing, maybe you're in the sort of early phases of your business and you're starting to take off, but you need to tackle this topic. Like, where do you start? Like, where should you first direct that small budget that you've got? And I guess it's a bang for buck question. Like, what's going to give you the best result for that kind of money that you spend? Is that a
Yeah,
fair
and
question?
yeah, it is a fair question, and the answer is always you can keep spending more and more and more, right? But if you're starting out and you're a small practice, there's a few things that I would say. You really got to work out what you need to have in place, and we talk about a sort of minimum level of technology that you should have, and making sure that the technology providers that you're using are also at a certain standard because that supply chain of your practice isn't just your practice, right? It goes from your clients the way that they communicate with you, the way that they share data with you, all the way through to the suppliers that you're using, whether it be a tech supplier or whether it being a service like an outsourced power planning or whatever it might be. There is a an ecosystem that your advice practice works on. And so it's not just for the first stage of the budget, it's not just about you, right? It's about how do you then do things. Now, you can do that in a way where you're not necessarily spending a lot of money on it, but you also might have to spend a little bit of time on those certain, checking
Mm.
your supply chain. Um, Things like cyber insurance, whilst I'm not an insurance broker, I can't give you insurance advice. I say to the firms, you've really got to have cyber insurance, a bit like having professional indemnity insurance. if something goes wrong, you really need to have some money there to be able to help clean up that mess that's been created. So I guess making sure that people have that. A lot of firms still don't have cyber insurance. You don't want it to be part of your PI insurance because your PI, you don't want to have a PI claim to start with if you have a cyber incident. But PI is just for your clients to claim on. You need some money for your business to claim on as well. So you need to have that in place. Going through a process where they understand what the regulatory guidance is. We always start with the regulatory guidance. So what does, say, ASIC, for example, what does the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, what does the Privacy Commissioner expect? What are the expectations of the regulatory environment? And it's pretty big to start with. It's pretty tempting for an advice firm to start with a bunch of band-aids. And when we work with firms, we often see they've got all sorts of things in place that they've put in place for one reason or another. And I describe it as very much like when a financial advice firm sees a client that might have an investment over there, and they might have an investment property over there, and they've got a couple of super funds over there, and they've got these things everywhere, but they don't actually work in a cohesive way together for one sort of purpose and plan. And we're very much around this doing that concept of how do we make everything work together in that one purpose and plan, and what are the big plans and frameworks and risks and that the regulators are talking about? What are the big things that they want to see in place, and making sure that that's in place? So it's probably a really difficult question to ask, when you talk about a small budget, but I think it does need to be a budget. And if you're doing your budgeting or your business planning, whenever you're doing it, you do actually need to put some money aside for data protection, in a way where it encompasses not just the technology that you're paying for, but also, training your team members and to use that technology you're paying for, and all those other things. So I think putting some money aside, understanding that it's not just a one-off too, like, cyber crime is not going anywhere. It's going to be around. You can't just say we've done it now. You kind of need to be on top of it on an ongoing basis. Just as you are as a provider, you're on it on an ongoing basis. You're not. It's not just something you did once and you can forget about. So I think budgeting
Mm.
budgeting money for it every year, but also budgeting time for it every year, because you do need to make sure that you're on top of it, that you're across it. As a director of a firm, ASIC's got some pretty direct information on their website that talks about the directors making sure they've got cyber fluency, making sure they can have appropriate and good quality conversations with their tech providers, with their tech, with their setup, so they can ask reasonable questions of, say, their IT professional. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, nice. Very good. Thank you. Good advice. And to your point about sort of a moving landscape, it's moving at such a pace. And I think when we chat about AI in a bit, it's an interesting conversation because you've got AI on the offense and you've got AI on the defense, and it's kind of like, where's that going to settle, and is it going to settle? It's an interesting question to maybe dig into in a bit.
Oh yeah,
You,
yeah.
yeah, you probably got opinions on that.
I've got a few opinions on the different uses of
Yeah,
AI. Yeah, but
yeah. Just before we get onto that topic, you mentioned client data, and we kind of take a lot of care in protecting the data that comes through our platform, and a practice's client data is gold as far as we're concerned, and we want to treat that with the utmost care in terms of security and privacy. But we're sort of, Claris is one part of the workflow, but there's a lot of other stages to that workflow. And do you have any advice on how practices should be thinking about things like storage and privacy, and just sort of visibility and transparency across that process?
yeah, and it's definitely difficult for advice firms in this space to be able to think about data in any other way than just a part of a piece of technology. But um, I have to say that you talked about it being gold. I like to use the analogy of a diamond. I think that that data is very precious, and the lifetime value of a client is often that of gold or a diamond. And
Mm.
so we should be treating that data like we're looking after that client's gold or diamonds, right? So if that was the case in a physical sense, what would you think about putting in place to protect your client's diamonds? And as the custodian of those diamonds, somebody who's looking after those diamonds, and you certainly wouldn't do certain things. You wouldn't ask them to pop them in the post, for example. You wouldn't leave them sitting in your mailbox out the front of your house. You wouldn't leave them sitting around or lying around for other people to come and grab. You want to make sure they're in a vault or they're away. So we talk about in a digital sense data in transit or data at rest are the two areas where it could be at rest at the vault, and when it's in transit, how long is it in transit for, and are we leaving it in transit? Are we leaving it in that place of limbo all the time? And so if we're asking our clients to send us their diamonds, we might create a secure process. We then, once the diamonds have been delivered, we don't leave them in the delivery truck, right? We make sure that they're in our vault. So thinking of it from a physical sense of how, the behavior, how we should be behaving, it's a good thing to do, I think, and to then turn around and go, right, how should we be behaving in a way? How would we behave in a physical world? And is the products that we're using in a digital sense, are they also behaving that way? And might not be the product, it might be the way that we behave with the product. So we might be using a product, but then not purging the information afterwards, or using a product and sending things to a client, but then not deleting it out of emails and making sure it's not still in there. There's certain processes around that could be to blame. It's about the human beings working with the technology to be able to make sure that data is in a safe spot once we've finished moving it around.
Mm. A lot of advisors tell us about the kind of complexity of the number of tools that they use. There's so many platforms and services, and it seems like every day there's something new for them to kind of get their head around and um, either evaluate or embrace or build into their flow. So there's more third-party platforms and apps than ever before to always transform some part of their process or bring more efficiency here or there. And there's always a process to go through when you're looking at those kind of platforms to bring into your practice. Is there some frameworks or a process that you suggest practices go through as they look at those platforms?
Yeah, I think and look, to be, 5, 10 years ago, I was like, here is a great shiny tool or product. How do we, how do we dive in and get
Yeah.
involved in it, right? Because if you love technology, you love seeing how these things work and how they evolve and how they might improve the client experience or whatever it might be. Um, the big things I would probably say in the space is, by all means, have a look at what might be being used and seeing what's out there. And in fact, you probably should know what's being used and what's out there. So you can think about the fact that, oh, maybe this would save my business X amount of time. Therefore, that's something I really need to do. So that's probably the first step. Once you do decide that that's something you might want to look at, then you really need to think about, well, how would a bank do their due diligence on this product, right? Have they got a security standard? Do they have a trust center where you can go in and see what level of security they've got? Well, if it was a bank, they would do a procurement process. They'd be like, Stuart, can you explain to us what you're doing around data retention? Can you explain to us what you're doing about this? And only after you pass that level of scrutiny do
Brittany?
the people that are making the purchasing decision decide whether the bells and whistles work for their business and can do that. So I would say to businesses that you should be looking on their website for their trust center, or looking on their website for their security standards that they adhere to, or whether it's whatever it might be. And if they're not there, ask about the security standards as part of the process before, when you're making that decision. So I think, obviously, one, knowing about the things, how they work. Two, understanding how the data flows and how that works, and would you do that in real life if somebody was handing you their actual precious gold, as you said, or diamonds, as I put it. And then thirdly, going on and looking at the company from a security point of view to say, are these people going to take the security of my client's data seriously? Because if they're not, then you should think about whether you use them. If they are, then you have to make a decision within the business to say, I've seen the standards that they adhere to. I've asked them what they do, and I can keep a record when I make the decision to use this product that I've looked at it. We agreed that that's appropriate, right? Because that
Mm.
decision was always going to lie back with the director of the business. If they don't make that decision later on, and if something goes wrong, it would be like, why didn't you check that? Surely that's a reasonable person would have checked that. And so it's behaving in that way. So I think those are probably the three things I would say.
Yeah. And going into client conversations with that kind of knowledge behind you, I think is really quite powerful. It's like, you can really bring a sense of trust and confidence to your clients because you know that you've gone through those processes and done your due diligence. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
solid advice. Thanks.
there's certain things that you'll see on people's websites like SOC 2 or ISO 27001. They're international global standards, and they're very much around making sure that one, you've done a whole lot of due diligence in the background. You've put a whole lot of standards and securities and policies and compliance and things in place. But the second thing that comes with those standards is that those companies are every day on that. It's not just a set and forget. It's that they're always monitoring. They're always making sure that multi-factor authentication is being used. They're always monitoring that whatever the list is, that those things are being adhered to. So when you do start to see those things on people's websites or they talk about them, you'll know that one is they've done some work, but two is that it's continually being monitored.
Mm. Yeah, and it's easy to lose it when if you drop off some of those checks and balances because it's essentially a real time monitoring service that you tap into that we certainly
Yeah.
tap into. It's like it's really good from a I guess an ongoing business process point of view.
Yeah, and when you went through that process, there would have been a lot of things that you picked up on at the time, things that you didn't know that you knew that you now need to know, and then that you're
Mm.
able to then understand that on time monitoring is a big part of it.
So if we shift the conversation around to AI and its role in privacy and security, I guess you could think about it in two different ways. You could think about AI being used for good and for nefarious purposes. So you've got this kind of, in some ways, a kind of conflict. You've got conflicting technology, and depending on the intent of the actors using it, they're either going to be attacking you or it's going to be helping you. What's your take on that? Like, do you think there's just going to be ever increasing threat of AI based security threats? And do you think the tools that we use are just going to get smarter in tackling those? Like, where do you see that going?
Yeah, so I think when I think about AI, and I like to call it artificial intelligence because there's two parts to that, and there's also automation, by the way, which we don't sort of talk about as much, but it's just as important because um, once you set things up, you can set them to be knocking on, especially in a security sense, you can set them up to be knocking on somebody's door 24 hours a day, and as soon as they let their guard down, you're in. So it's not just about artificial intelligence or a lot of the generative AI we talk about is really about putting a creative brain creating something new out of something that's intelligent. And so with a business, we all want intelligence. That's a no-brainer. The artificial intelligence space is coming up with new ways of hacking you all the time and then automating it. And so there is a hugely increased level of risk in the cybersecurity space that AI has generated. And so, yes, and we'll talk about some of the amazing tools that AI has generated as well. But there is also this thing that hackers, you're using AI well in your business. Hackers can also start using AI very well in
Mm.
their business, which is the business of tricking you or tricking your clients into believing you're one or the other. So, we're seeing things around deep fakes and scams in that space that's starting to be used in the AI world, through to the no longer is the email grammatically incorrect. That's the phishing campaign email. It can be more targeted to you based on scans. It can go in and look for reasons why we should be sending this email to you and look for articles. So the searchability in AI, searching for information that the company might have announced or searching for information that the company might have been talking about to then go and use it as a tool to manipulate employees of the company or between the company, and getting it and trying to wedge its way into the either relationship between people within the business or the relationship that people have with their clients. So yeah, there's lots of different.
Yep.
There's probably way too many ways to discuss, but it's definitely increased the threat of scams to businesses and threats to businesses.
Mm. And don't forget the power of voice. So AI generated voice is going to become, I think, an increasingly sophisticated method of attack where you've got someone who has potentially been hacked and AI knows its voice, knows their voice to then, you know, call you up and generate a conversation, which is slightly scary.
And I say this a little bit about AI too, in the sense that we've known it for some time to be not quite perfect, right? So there is an artificial element to it. Um, it's never been it's never been as good as it is now, and it's never been as bad as it is now. So, if for those that are listening to this conversation, days or weeks or months after the recording, it's going to just get better and better. It's better and better, and it's never going to go backwards.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that's the opportunity and that's the threat. It's walking that fine line between practice efficiency and helping your team do their job a lot better, but being conscious of what's on the other side of that and just being aware of some of the threats and risks around it.
Yep. I also
Excuse
I
me.
also like to think of trying to work out how will you from a relationship point of view, and I think I spoke about this to you last time. It's about going the idea of artificial intelligence is, well, we all want intelligence in the business, but how do we turn the technology into something that's a little bit more authentic intelligence, and then to be able to say to your client, this is how we use technology to better the product and service we're offering to you, and this is how we're able to benefit you from using the use of this technology. Bringing them in onto the inside of the process, not trying to do things in a way where you're going, we've just done this thing, even though we've used AI to do it, but we're pretending that we've done it. So if you're for
Mm.
those that are ever doing anything with AI or generative AI or any of the tools that allow you to write certain things, it's about going, great, we use this tool in this way. I think some of the best and most authentic posts that came out on LinkedIn, for example, when ChatGPT was first launched, was, hey, I just put this information to ChatGPT and here's what it said. How accurate is that, or not accurate, for whatever it might be? Whereas these days, people are going to ChatGPT to write their article and pretending it's them. There's a difference, right? You're either inside the joke or you're outside of the joke, and it's a bit like a magician doing its tricks to you, or whether they show you the trick and you go, I feel like we're on the same team now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Fraser, you said at the start that people essentially are the weakest link in this process, and I get that. It's you can train people, you can provide tools, and you can provide frameworks to operate in, but it comes down to people remembering to do things. What's what sort of actually does work when you're talking about kind of rolling out new processes or technology in the sense of training your staff and helping them understand the process around security and the importance of it. What works and what just wastes everyone's time. Have you got kind of some tips around that and help practice
Yeah,
owners think
so
about that?
so I think team culture is one of those things that we use the word pretty, blasé, oh yeah, good culture this, good culture that. But culture is actually something that a strong culture is something that takes a lot more time and effort to do. And you think about sporting teams that have got a great culture and those sorts of things, and they tend to be the winning teams. They're all, or they're up there in the finals every year. You talk about some businesses that have different styles of culture. I think of culture as from a mining perspective, there's a safety culture, right? And that's led from the top down, which is a pretty heavy culture, but still it doesn't. People aren't loving it, like it. And I think of the way that culture is something that everybody needs to really, really enjoy doing as part of that, and they don't even see it as part of their work. So how do you do that? With if somebody loves technology, they will often get involved in technology, and they'll be the ones that are leading the way, and there'll be others that are laggards and go, do we have to start using that? And some of the words that are being used is we have to do this versus we really get to do this, and we're lucky enough to be able to do it, right? So culture is an interesting thing in the fact that everybody currently has a way of doing things now. So it's not like you can just say, here is a new way of doing things and introduce a new culture. You need to actually move from an existing place and habit and behaviors to a new place of habit and behaviors. And that change process, when you're introducing a new tool in your business or whatever it might be, is actually a human being based process, not just a logical. So the logical process is straightforward. We do this, we do that, and this is the new way of doing it. But there is a whole emotional piece that's often forgotten about. And when I think of culture, number one, you have to understand the change process. Number two, you have to work on the behaviors and the habits of people. Those behaviors and habits then drive that person's identity. So if you think about how people identify as something, somebody might identify as somebody who's fit and healthy because they go to the gym and they exercise regularly, right? And their behaviors turn into their identity. Or if they've got bad habits, those bad habits might turn into their identity. Oh, I'm a smoker, or I'm a blah blah blah, whatever it might be. That's their identity, and that identity is going to drive future behaviors. Because they've identified as that type of person. So changing a culture is really around going, how do we get our team to identify as, in my case, cybersecurity, how do I get them to identify as somebody who cares about our clients so much that they go to all this extra effort in cyber? What are the behaviors they need to do? How does that become part of their identity? How does that identity drive future behaviors? And then the next level after that is, how do I get them to take care of the people around them in that space? So it's not just them; it's the rest of the people that work on the team. It's the clients. It's their family, their parents, who are clicking on links. It's their kids, whatever it might be. How do we get those people to take responsibility for what they see around them and the behaviors in those, and become leaders in that space? And then you can start saying that you've built a culture, because you've got the people who are working for you all wanted to be leading. And I'm not talking about whether they're a manager or not a manager. They all want to be leading in that space of technology or cyber or whatever it might be. So I think it starts with directed behaviors. We want you to act this way, turns them into habits. That becomes part of their identity. That then drives future behaviors and habits. And then if they can take responsibility for other people, then you get to that next level where people start teaching, or people start taking responsibility for those around them. I think that's what I think about when I think about behaviors and cultures and teams. And I love the old Simon Sinek saying that, says, I think he said, a team is not a group of people who work together or play together. It's a group of people who trust each other. And in our space, it's around trusting your teammates or your workmates to have your back just as much as you've got their back, just as much as you're all having the client's back, and those sorts of things. So I think that we talk about having a trusted relationship, and that's why I think security and technology fits so well into that trusted relationship, because you can demonstrate to your clients how you've got their back or how you're doing something for them, by using the right technology and using it in the right way. That's probably a
Mm.
long-winded way of saying that. To me, the human behavioral side of introducing technology is a big part. And I know that from the logical stats say that 95% or 19 out of 20 incidents all involve a human. And I say to people, we spend 95% of their budget on technology, and 95% of the issues are the team members not being trained. So we need to actually shift to focusing on spending some time and making sure the team members are engaged in that technology.
Yeah, nice. Thanks. To use another one of Simon Sinek's, I guess, approaches, like if people know the why, around security and they know the kind of basis of it and purpose for it, then I think they'll they'll also buy into it more. Like if they know that it's because of they're protecting their clients, diamonds, so to speak,
Yeah.
and there's some very strong, solid reasons for it from both their business point of view, but also from a client security point of view, then hopefully that will help support that culture that you bring into it as well.
Yeah, you have to have that shared values and beliefs as well. I 100%
Yeah.
agree, and that why to a lot of firms that I've worked with, and been a part of, it's really around helping clients, right? Their everyday job
Mm.
is helping clients be in a better position, helping clients be safer, helping clients be protected, and those are their fundamental values that a lot of advice firms share, whether you be the person doing the data collection through to the person delivering advice or anywhere in the business itself. Pretty much everybody would bend over backwards to help their clients, and that's where we
Mm.
certainly see if everybody starts at that position, uses that as a north star, and then the the direction for doing whatever they need to do in the meantime is all about that, then I think people grab hold of it.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting when you think about the explosion of remote work, work from home offices where, since COVID, that's kind of exploded and people are working from anywhere. Like, does that sort of just complicate the whole security discussion and setup and the process that a practice needs to go through to onboard staff, for example? Does that kind of confuse it or does it?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, there's so many different levels to that as well. Like we tend to put them in big buckets of, working from home, working remotely, offshoring, onshoring, those types of conversations. But it's not just that simple. When you chunk down into those different areas, there's a lot of decisions that should be made along the way. And if we talk about working from a secure environment, whether that be at home or not at home, it depends on the team member, right? Depends on the secure environment, depends on their living situation, their family, where they're working from, how they're connecting to the internet, how they're using the tools, all those types of things are grey areas that you kind of need to make a decision on, whether you do or don't, allow that to happen. And so, we've put them into big buckets, working from home or working from the office, where it's not quite that simple. There are a lot more intricacies that really should be gone into in that space. So, not just assuming because somebody's working from home that they're okay. Are they working on the computer that belongs to the business, or are they working on their own computer? Are they an employee? Are they a contractor? Are they under your employment contract, and therefore do you train them? Do you support them and work with them? How are they connecting to the internet? Is it through their free router that they were given by their tech provider? Their internet provider that their kids are also on with their PlayStations and other devices, their whole Internet of Things with no security connecting to the list just goes on and on and on. And so you don't I don't want to just say that one's good and one's bad. It comes back down to a risk assessment, like everything. Yeah, am I prepared to take the risk with my clients' diamonds by doing it this way? Am I prepared to take this
Mm.
risk? And if you are, then you document that and you say, I've looked at this. I can't see any reason why not. But if you're not, then you need to work through a process to say, what are we prepared to accept? And I talk to firms all the time about this concept of an APL, like an approved product list. When APLs were, that word is often used in the sense of an advice firm or an AFSL. We're talking about investment products, right? Approved product list of investment products. Do you have an approved product list of technology products, right? Do you have an approved product list of service providers like outsourced power planning or whatever it might be, or outsourced working teams? And having that approved product list based on the fact that you've been through the security of those and approving them, I think it's just as important as having an investment approved product list.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When it comes to data breaches, I know this is kind of a topic where no one sort of wants to think about it because it's one of those things where you just go like, this is going to it's going to be bad, whichever way you look at it. But say, for example, a practice has had a data breach and they've put all the right precautions in place as much as they were able to, within their remit. But what does the first sort of 24 hours look like after that kind of thing happens? And going back to your recommendations about cybersecurity, maybe just kind of tied in with that, or sorry, cyber insurance tied in with that, and just give us some, I guess, high level thinking around how practices need to think about a data breach.
Yeah, and I guess firstly, it's a very, very stressful time, right? And I talked before about emotion versus logic, and logic can often go out the window at this moment. It's a bit, it's, people's adrenaline kicks in. There's fight or flight type or freeze mentality can kick in. People can spend a lot of time in the wrong areas, as in how did they get in and what's going on before thinking about protecting their clients and letting clients know. So there's just, it's a chaotic time. It's a time of blame and shame. It's a time where there is so many emotions going around that if you don't have a process or a plan in place to follow, it's hard to find the logical way to follow. It can also be a time when people aren't sure, they don't know, and there's a lot of unknowns at that time. So you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know most of it. But there, it's confusing and it's confronting and it's all those things, and people find it very difficult to continue on with a normal business as usual whilst that's going on. So it's very, very disruptive in that sense. What often happens is you're judged later on this, by the way. You're judged after, 2 years down the track, whether you handle it appropriately or not, whether you find yourself in court with the regulator or not because you didn't handle it well. So all of these things it's really important. So one, we always say make sure that you've got your compliance and due diligence in place. So your compliance is making sure you've got your plans and policies and procedures and process, all the things that you're supposed to have that most people don't really have. Or they have in some degree, like I said before, band-aids everywhere, but not necessarily all working together. So make sure your compliance documentation's in place, and make sure that you are training your team and you can prove it and you can demonstrate it, all that stuff. At the time, if you do find out you're under attack and you do have cyber insurance, which I would say is one of the main reasons. If I go back to that in cyber insurance, the insurance company pretty much acts as the fire brigade as well as the rebuilder, right? So they will come out and help you put the fire out at the time when you need it, and they will also help you rebuild. And so if you don't have that insurance in place, then automatically you start incurring a lot of costs. And I'm not talking about buying new computers and putting your system back up and date. There is a lot of issues that you need to sort out. Forensic logs of what happened, how did it happen, what communications are you giving to your team members, to your clients, to your other stakeholders of the business, what's going out, what happens when the media calls, what are you saying to them, what are you doing regarding the reporting obligations to the Australian Cyber Security Centre, to the Privacy Commissioner? You've got deadlines around what you've got supposed to be doing, let alone reporting to ASIC. So 9 times out of 10, you need to have an experienced cyber lawyer working for you from the very first moment. And if you've got cyber insurance, then you will contact the insurance cyber lawyer company, the claims line, and they will get onto it straight away. It's in their interest to put the fire out as soon as possible, right? To contain the damage. Yep. And so what you really want to do is do that. But because there is so many different things going on at the same time, it's very difficult for a business owner to manage that process logically, because they are just generally a mess. There's also things around taking care of your team, because generally somebody in the team might be responsible. And that might be a loved team member that is now a hated team member, right? But they're also freaking out about, and they've got their own head stuff going on that they need to be looked after. So there's a lot going on for a business owner, and to have a logical brain thinking like the lawyer that's going to be doing the work, that's following the plan that you've already set out. Things go a lot smoother. So making sure you've got a plan in place. and just those things like, who's going to talk to the media, what are you going to say to them, because they're going to ring, they're going to find out, and they're going to call. What are you going to say to your team members about, keeping the morale up when everybody has just hit rock bottom? All those sorts of things. So it is a crazy time, and a data breach can be a data breach, can be a data breach, it can be all sorts of different things, happen in all sorts of ways, and so you just got to try and prepare for most. And yeah, and if something's not quite the same, but data breaches can be all sorts of things, from theft, from ransom, from mistaken, sending the wrong thing to the wrong people or the wrong group. It can be insider threat where somebody's taken a copy of your database, and all those sorts of things, right? They're all
Mm.
different levels of data theft or data loss, that need to be thought about. So I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not sure
sounds
that
like it's
completely answers.
preparing for the worst, expecting the best.
Yeah, you're exactly right,
Yeah,
but I think that uh, it's going to happen. It's not. With the fact that we're just getting more and more and more threats happening. It's going to happen to every advice firm. It's not if, it's when, and it might not just happen once. It might happen multiple times.
right. Okay. Well, that's a big topic. Maybe we can explore another time. That's
Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like it's a sort of critical one. Would that be one of the things that you look at when you first come into a practice to kind of just evaluate their setup and security awareness? Is that a kind of top of mind?
Yeah. When we work through a framework, we generally start. If you think of most frameworks, start from the beginning, as in before an incident. So I call it before, during, and after.
Mm.
Um, the framework starts with governance. They start with, what are the directors taking responsibility? What are the risks to the business? Let's assess what the risks are. Let's put protections and mitigations in place so that we can do that. Let's also then be able to detect and respond and recover to any incident. So, your insurance is really around the responding and recovering area, having plans in place and having your documentation in place to be able to say, this is what we're going to do. Having your staff trained, running a cyber drill to say to your staff, the same way as you would a fire drill, the same way as somebody might, first responder would
Yep.
do first aid training. They do it of sound mind. They're thinking about that from a logical point of view. When the emotions kick in, they've gone, oh, hang on, we've done this before. We know how this works. We can follow the plan. But we might need a reminder that, the doctor ABC stands for blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, we've done it before a few times, and we know what's happening. So, being prepared, yes, but also having that stuff in place, that's going to help you respond and recover, and understanding that, your IT team, there's not going to be the only IT team that needs to follow the process. You're going to need to get forensic IT looking at logs. The insurance company needs to have their IT team, because the problem might be in your IT team, right? You don't know just yet. So
Mm.
so, we've seen scenarios where the IT team had something go wrong, and people got in that way, but the IT team then went, oh no, it's not us. It must be, like it's you need to quickly get to the truth, and track down the truth of what happened so that you can respond. So yeah, there is a definite process, and all of the things that we do go for cover that whole framework of before, during, and after an event.
Mm. Very, very good. That's very valuable advice. Thank you. I think it just certainly gives me a good perspective of kind of what to start thinking about. And you can have all the processes and policies in place, but the fire drill is a really good concept, I think. Let's kind of run through this and let's just make sure that we know what to do and when to do it and kind of what that might look like. So, yeah, very, very good. Thank you. Fraser, just really a closing question to kind of wrap this up. And I'm not sure if you can even answer this in the kind of way that I'm expecting, but like, do you have the top three? Like, what are the top three tips for practices looking to really kind of lift their security stance, to kind of upweight their security protocols and policies and thinking just to become more robust in that way?
Um, I would definitely say the first tip is just because you know something doesn't mean you actually apply it. And so I would really just say that some action but just because you know stuff, but that next step is putting things in place. So actually, reaching out and actually to taking action in some way, speaking to your IT team, speaking to those around you, your licensee, your compliance teams, etc. What are the actions that you should be doing? So I would say that probably the first step is taking action. As I said before, that assumption around assuming that your IT team, that cyber is just tech, is a blind spot. So, not just thinking it's tech, making sure that you got, as you mentioned before, budget around insurance, budget around training your teams, budget around, making sure you got the compliance documentation, but not just budget around the technology. So thinking from a tech budget point of view needs to be tech and security. The third thing is, I don't always assume that technology is security, because sometimes, and I say this from the space of being there, done that when it comes to building technology, is you want to make it work, right? And so the best case scenario when you're setting up someone's email or you're a tech provider is everything works, right? And to make everything work is a different mindset than in security when we try to stop everything from working. So in many senses, it's like I think of it as a tap. The job of a tech person is to turn the tap on full bore. When you put a security overlay on that, you're actually turning the tap back to just the trickle that you need to run your business. So I would say that's probably the third scenario, that just because somebody is in tech doesn't mean that they're looking at security. They're different mindsets from that point of view.
Awesome. And if anyone needs more information about any of this, please contact Fraser. He's your man. He's clearly, as you've seen, on it, and he knows what he's talking about, and has got experience to help. So, Fraser, really appreciate your time today, and I think that'll be massive value for practices listening in, and look forward to our next chat.
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate having me on.